All right, and now here we are for our second reading, our last video for the week of this 12th Sunday in Ordinary Time. So here's the deal. We've already actually read this reading during our year at some point. My guess is that it was during the season of Lent, but I don't know that for sure. But anyway, it's part of a reading. The reading must have been much larger actually whenever we read it during the season of Lent is my guess. Anyway, so Romans chapter 5 verses 12 through 15. So just 4 verses. Let's get into it. Here we go. Romans chapter 5, verses 12 through 15. Brothers and sisters, through one man sin entered the world, and through sin death, and thus death came to all, inasmuch as all sinned. For up to the time of the law sin was in the world, though sin is not accounted when there is no law. But death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those who did not sin after the pattern of the trespass of Adam, who is the type of the one who was to come. But the gift is not like the transgression. For if by that one man's transgression the many died, how much more did the grace of God and the gracious gift of the one man, Jesus Christ, overflow for the many? There it is. Okay, great. So what's going on here in this reading? I think it's in some ways pretty simple, straightforward. We got to go all the way back to what we call the fall. I'm sure many of us have heard of this, or original sin, the original sin, all the way back in Genesis chapter 3. When Adam and Eve chose to rebel against the one command that God gave to them, this unleashed a whole series of consequences into the world because they had cut themselves off from their source of life. We got to think about this. This is an image that I use all the time, but imagine you have a tree, right, with all of its branches, and you cut off a branch from that tree. What's going to happen to that branch? Well, it no longer has its source of life. It's no longer attached to the base of the tree, the trunk of the tree, which gives it the sap. And so that branch is going to die. This is the kind of thing that we're talking about. It's not a perfect image, a perfect example, but I think it is helpful nonetheless that when man and woman rebel against the very one who gives them life, the only natural result is death. And not just death for them, but now they're going to reproduce. And when they reproduce, they're reproducing as those branches that have been cut off from God. And so everyone that they produce now, and all of their offspring and their descendants are going to die. This is the thing, that death was not really part of God's plan. In fact, we know that from the Book of Wisdom, it talks about how man was made for immortality, but it is only through the envy of the devil that death enters the world. Death was not part of God's plan. In Romans chapter 6, verse 23, the wages of sin is death. This is the thing. So now, through one man, sin entered the world, and through sin, death. And thus, death came to all men. Right? This is the reason why we die, is because sin exists in the world, because sin has been introduced into the world, and we might say introduced. It's not quite the thing. It's sin is like a lack, because that's what evil is. Evil is a lack of something that should be there. So sin, in so many ways, it's like, yeah, it's not that something has been introduced, it's that something has been taken away. And what is that something? That something is the source of life, which is the grace of God. In fact, the word sin is hamartia, which means to miss the mark. So you can imagine, right? So Adam and Eve in the garden, they have this aim in mind, and the aim is a misplaced aim, because whatever, they've been deceived, and so when they shoot, when they take the fruit and eat of it, they miss the mark. And when they miss the mark, that means that they end up opposite or away from where they ought to be, which is the source of their life. So that now we are all, what is the word? I don't know what the word is, but we're all sinners, and it's related to that word hamartia. Anyway, so that's the deal. Okay, so now, inasmuch as all sinned, for up to the time of the law, sin was in the world. Although Paul says this is fascinating. Though sin is not accounted when there is no law. Which I guess makes sense. So in other words, what's going on? God knows that his people are rebelling against him. And the only reason that they know that they're rebelling against him is because of the initial command that he gave. But then there's further sin that takes place. And this further sin, it's introduced, or it's explained when the Lord gives different laws throughout history. Think of the 10 Commandments. Now that the 10 Commandments are in place, the people know how they can maintain a good relationship with God. and they rebel against those 10 commandments anyways, right? That's where sin comes into play, or at least an acknowledgement of sin. But nonetheless, whether there's a law or not a law, because of the first sin, because of the fall, original sin, what does Paul say? He says death reigned from Adam to Moses. It reigned. What does that mean? It's like a king that rules over us, an authority that governs us. That the one certain thing about all of us, that watching the video, making the video, whatever, is that we're all going to die. And this is the thing. We can't do anything about it. We can try to prolong our days, we can try to delay and take care of our health, or whatever, but we're all going to die. Death reigns. It says from Adam to Moses, but we know that even after Moses, death continues to reign. But then he says what? Even over those who did not sin after the pattern of the trespass of Adam. So in other words, people die even when they're innocent. Who would those people be? Well, the unborn. Think of like miscarriages, or sometimes those people are killed through abortion. But also just like infants or children who die very young. They haven't committed any personal transgressions against the Lord, and yet we know that they are born into this place of spiritual death, into a state of spiritual death through no fault of their own. Right? Because children, babies, they can't make the conscious choice to rebel against God and his commandments. It's kind of a sad thing. But then what happens? But the gift is not like the transgression. The gift is not like it. For if by the transgression of the one many died, how much more did the grace of God and the gracious gift of the one man, Jesus Christ, overflow for the many? This is the thing, is Paul sees this. This is such an important passage, that because of the deception of the devil, death enters into the world, and through that all men die, all people die. But now the grace, the gift that God gives in the person of his son Jesus, this actually overflows for the many. It overflows for all who want to claim allegiance to Jesus Christ. It's this incredible gift, but you got to claim the allegiance, right? You have to let yourself. So anyway, so just to kind of summarize it, right? What's going on here? So through the trespass, death comes into the world, whereas through the gift, life comes into the world. That death, that trespass, it brings condemnation through disobedience, which makes sinners. It makes the many sinners. Whereas the free gift, which brings life, it brings justification, or we might say it brings acquittal, right? As like we're on trial and we've been acquitted by the grace of God. And this acquittal, it comes through obedience, through the obedience of Jesus Christ, which then does what? It makes the many righteous. So God, he does the exact opposite. So when Paul says the gift is not like the transgression, he's like, yes, exactly. Like it's more than that. It's the exact opposite, in fact. That what the sin of Adam and Eve bring into the world is the worst possible thing. Therefore, what the grace of God, what the death and resurrection of Jesus brings into the world, the obedience of Jesus, is the best possible thing. Now it's for us, for you and for me, to claim that best possible thing and to embrace it with our whole heart, with our whole mind, with our whole strength, with our whole soul. There we go. Okay, God bless you. Have a great Sunday, a great Lord's Day as we celebrate, and I'll see you next week. God bless you.